So, how many of you have seen a cartoon where the character gets saved from falling off a cliff by grabbing a branch at the last second? Well, this seems to be a common cartoon trope. The kids and I watched The Emperor's New Groove the other day, one of my favorite movies, and there was a very funny part that kind of involved this branch idea. I'm going to let you watch it for just a second.
Okay, here's the deal. Stretch out your neck, and I'll grab the rope.
How do I know you won't let me fall after you grab the rope?
You're just gonna have to trust me.
You know, it's a good thing you're not a big fat guy, or this would be really difficult.
Almost. It's stuck.
Take your time. No hurry here.
Scorpion! Push off!
So last week we looked at verse 1 of O Come, O Come Emmanuel, and this week we're going to be looking at a second verse which says this: O come, O branch of Jesse's stem, unto your own and rescue them. From depths of hell your people save, and give them victory o'er the grave. Rejoice, rejoice, O Israel, to thee shall come Emmanuel. So prior to the passage we're looking at today, Isaiah had been talking about judgment and the judgment against other nations and against Israel, and then he shifts to focusing on a future hope for the nation of Israel. So let's look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 12. We're going to look at the whole passage that includes this idea of the branch. It says this: Out of the stump of David's family will grow a shoot, yes, a new branch bearing fruit from the old root. And the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He will delight in obeying the Lord. He will not judge by appearance, nor make a decision based on hearsay. He will give justice to the poor and make fair decisions for the exploited. The earth will shake at the force of his word, and one breath from his mouth will destroy the wicked. He will wear righteousness like a belt and truth like an undergarment. In that day the wolf and the lamb will live together. The leopard will lie down with the baby goat. The calf and the yearling will be safe with the lion, and a little child will lead them all. The cow will graze near the bear. The cub and the calf will lie down together. The lion will eat hay like a cow. The baby will play safely near the hole of a cobra. Yes, a little child will put its hand in a nest of deadly snakes without harm. Nothing will hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For as the waters fill the sea, so the earth will be filled with people who know the Lord. In that day the heir to David's throne will be a banner of salvation to all the world. The nations will rally to him, and the land where he lives will be a glorious place. In that day the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to bring back the remnant of his people, those who remain in Assyria and northern Egypt, in southern Egypt, Ethiopia and Elam, in Babylonia, Hamath, and all the distant coastlands. He will raise a flag among the nations and assemble the exiles of Israel. He will gather the scattered people of Judah from the ends of the earth. Now, there are a few things we can look at in this passage that speaks about the branch. So let's take a look at them. The first is the attributes of the branch. There's this description of who he is. It says the Spirit of the Lord rests on him. As we know from the Gospels, this is speaking of the power of the Holy Spirit, and it's a spirit of wisdom and understanding. Now, wisdom is a primary attribute of God that, according to the Bible, cannot be attained by human means. It's different than common sense, and it's different than knowledge. It cannot be learned, and it is only given by God. In the Old Testament, when these two words are connected like this, it seems to be connected with creative ability given by God to particular people. Secondly, it says it's a spirit of counsel and might. Counsel is just what it sounds like, advice. Might is also what it sounds like, strength. Together they give the idea of planning for war, counseling, giving advice to go to war, to use your strength. And it says it's a spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. Now, knowledge in a spiritual context would always point you back to the Genesis story and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. At that time, Adam and Eve took knowledge without the fear of the Lord, or in the absence of the fear of the Lord. They did it in rebellion, and it destroyed them and everyone else. Knowledge without the fear of the Lord is destructive, but knowledge with the fear of the Lord gives life. The branch also delights in obeying the Lord. This would point us right back to the Torah, to God's commands. He is someone who would faithfully follow all of God's commands. Next, we have these actions, a series of things that the branch will do, actions he will take. First of all, it talks about the fact that he is fair. Then he says he gives justice to the poor. Then it says he destroys the wicked, and that righteousness and truth are what define him. Now, why is this important? Well, I want you to think about the idea of what Israel was going through, what the Jews were going through as they were hearing this prophecy. They were being oppressed by other nations. They were being taken over. Poverty was rampant among the people. And they needed a king. They were looking for a king who would be fair, who would give justice, who would destroy their enemies, and who would be a king basically like David. And Isaiah is promising them someone from the root of David who would be a king like David, who would be fair and give justice and destroy the wicked and would be defined by righteousness and truth. And finally, we see images of the branch's future kingdom, of his future kingdom. Now, some of these are familiar, like the lion laying down with the lamb, but they all seem future to us right now. We know that these things haven't happened yet. This is a prophecy in process. Some parts have come to pass, but some are still being worked out. One of the more interesting parts of this kingdom is that the branch will be a banner for all the nations. The word for banner is used in two events that would be very familiar to the Israelites. The first, in Exodus 17, describes a battle that the Israelites had with another nation called the Amalekites. While Joshua is leading the army in battle, Moses sits on a hill overlooking the people. As long as his hands were raised, Israel was winning. But as he got tired, his arms began to fall and Israel began to lose. So Aaron, his brother, and Hur came and helped Moses by holding his arms up, and the Israelites won the battle. After the battle, Moses built an altar and called it Yahweh Nisi, the Lord is my banner. In effect, he was saying that Yahweh was the one that won all the battles. The other event is in Numbers chapter 21. God disciplined Israel for their rebellion by sending snakes to bite them. It says the snake bite was fiery and caused a great deal of pain and eventually killed them. So when they cried out to God, God told Moses to make a snake out of bronze and place it on a pole. And anyone who looked at it in faith would be healed. The word for pole and for banner are the same word. Now this is significant because Jesus points to this event and says that just as the snake was lifted up in the wilderness, so that he, Jesus, would be lifted up on the cross, and anyone who looked on him in faith would be saved. So who is the banner? Jesus. When Jesus died on the cross, he became the banner of salvation for the whole world. Jesus is the flag that will draw his people together one day at his holy mountain where former enemies dwell together and where no one will be hurt. What a wonderful promise, and what a wonderful fulfillment to this passage. But there's more. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, it says, So the family, this is Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, the family went and lived in a town called Nazareth. This fulfilled what the prophets had said. He will be called a Nazarene. Now the problem is that there is nowhere in the Old Testament where it says that, unless you look a little deeper. During the period between the end of Malachi and the beginning of Matthew, there are about 400 years of Jewish history. The Greek Empire arose during this time and conquered the Medo-Persian Empire, which included Israel. The goal of the Greeks was to make everyone in the world good Greeks. So they tried to introduce Greek culture everywhere. They built Greek cities, they put in Greek play theaters, they put in Greek games, they made Greek temples, and they wanted everyone to become Greek. And this worked really well, except in Israel, who resisted it. Excuse me. One of the Greek rulers of Israel, Antiochus Epiphanes IV, was particularly cruel. He was actually the fulfillment of a prophecy in Daniel. He did what was called the abomination which causes desolation. He desecrated the temple. Because of his cruelty and what he was doing, a group of families from Bethlehem left because Bethlehem was very close to Jerusalem where the worst of this persecution was happening. They moved to the extreme north of the country. Now let me step out of that story for a second to explain something about olive trees. If an olive tree stops producing fruit, it can be cut down. But if you leave the stump, the little olive shoots will grow up from the roots of the original tree. And these can grow up into quite productive olive trees themselves. Sometimes these shoots can grow quite a distance from the original plant. In the Bible, the olive tree is a regular symbol of Israel. So God had disciplined Israel through exile. He had cut it down. But he was promising that a branch, a shoot, would grow from the original root. The word for branch in Hebrew is netzer. Now when the families of Bethlehem from the city of David founded this new village in the far north of Israel, they saw themselves in this passage. They saw themselves as a shoot growing up from the branch of David and called the village Netzer-et, the branch town. We know it as Nazareth. In an amazing fulfillment of prophecy, Mary and Joseph returned to their hometown and raised Jesus, the Netzer promised in Isaiah, in Nazareth, the town named after the same passage. Jesus is the branch raised in the branch town by two people from the branch town to be the one who will restore his people. Isn't that amazing? I just love that. And there's a few things we should glean from all of this, I believe. First, do you realize the incredibly complicated series of events that had to take place for Jesus to fulfill this piece of prophecy? You're smart, so I won't spell it out for you, but it's significant. And when I see God work in these ways, it always reminds me that the same God who works out these details is the same God working in our lives today. Now, I don't know what you're going through. But if you're following Jesus, if you're obeying God and you're submitted to his will, then he is working out the details of your life as well. Second, this is a reminder that Jesus is exactly who he said he was. He had absolutely no control over this town being formed or the fact that he would be raised there. But there it is. And this is just one prophecy of hundreds that he fulfilled in being the Messiah. But finally, let's think about Jesus as our banner for a second. Certainly he came to save us, but he didn't cease being the banner at that point. In a battle, what did a banner do? Well, it let warriors know where their lines were so they could regroup and continue to fight. It identified them as a part of a certain army. It gave them an identity. If Jesus is our banner, shouldn't we be his banner to others? Shouldn't we be bringing righteousness and justice and truth to others? Shouldn't we be joining together and fighting for the souls of those around us? Shouldn't we be a rallying point for the hurt and wounded, healing them so they can return to the battle? Shouldn't we exist as a place of peace where enemies come together and no one is hurt or destroyed? Well, I would say so. But is the church known as this? Sadly, I would say that most people outside the church don't see us like this at all. They don't see us as a place of healing and of peace. So how do we change that? Well, this season, I want you to ask yourself this question. How can I change the image that we have and become the bringer of peace to the world? I want you to go out this week and I want you to find ways to be the banner to the people around you. So as you are led by Jesus, the Netzer, the branch, the one who is the Messiah, be his banner for the people in your life. May God bless you this season.